Hi guys, my name is Jason Lanier and this is my no hype impression of the Sony A1. You may want to watch this before you hit that pre-order button, my friends. I'm going to just say the Sony A1 is going to be the best camera in the world. Hands down, best overall camera in the world. So before you watch the rest of this, just understand that's where I'm coming from. But as soon as it was released, people on YouTube and everywhere else were hyperventilating. They were, it's almost like a Jim Jones moment with everybody going crazy over the A1. I've even laughed as I've watched Sony photographers say they're gonna start OnlyFans sites so they can raise $6,500. Now that's pretty funny, but let's be real, the vast majority of us photographers would have to actually pay people to come to our OnlyFans sites. I don't think people would pay to see us, so let's just put that to rest. Sony didn't become the top-selling brand in the world by having tons of pros buy their cameras. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Pros shunned Sony. The vast majority of photographers who made Sony #1 were semi-pros, hobbyists, and just people who love photography. The 80% of you out there who made Sony who they are today, you don't need this camera. It may appeal to you, but it doesn't really apply to you. The reason I'm making this video is I did a live stream on my YouTube channel a day or two after the A1 came out, and I was just offering my opinions as people asked on the live stream. And I was kind of surprised when people were saying you're the only one saying this kind of stuff. And I'm saying, well, to me that just kind of makes sense. I mean, the camera's $6,500. This really isn't applicable to the vast majority of people who own and use Sony. Let's be real. So to put out any fires ahead of time, just let me state, I'm sure I'll own this camera. It's going to be amazing for someone like me. I shoot video, I do YouTube videos, I do documentaries. I do all sorts of types of work, from landscapes to architecture to portraiture to all sorts of those things. To someone like me, a full-time professional, this camera fits a lot of the buckets that I have. But it's not the best overall value camera to the vast majority of people who own and shoot Sony. I don't say that in a condescending way. I'm trying to be helpful. I looked at all the images that were produced in the Sony promo video. All of those images pretty much could be done with their current crop of cameras. I wasn't like, oh, wow, I could never do that with an A9 or an R3 or an R4. I didn't look at any of those images and think that couldn't be done. And that is not to disparage the artists who created those images at all. What I'm saying is, let's have some perspective here. Okay, before you go out and spend all of your hard-earned money on one camera body, I mean, $7,000 by the time you pay taxes and everything in the US, that's like $20 million for Australians and Canadians. So you really have to be careful how you spend your money. The vast majority of people who are making a living in some way, shape, or form in the world of photography, unless you're at a very high end, are wedding photographers. If you're not a wedding photographer, you're a portrait photographer. I still think the best camera in the world for portrait photography is an A7R III. I really do. I think the A7R III is actually the best overall value camera in the world, still to this day. I love that camera. One of the main reasons I never got the A7R IV was 60 plus megapixels was beyond overkill. I didn't need it. The vast majority of us don't even need 50 megapixels. That is reality. The A1, the steak sauce of cameras, is a major flex by Sony to say, watch out, mother freakers, there's no better camera in the world than the A1. But to my followers and so many of the other people who watch the other channels, you don't need all of the specs on this camera to justify spending money that you could spend on lenses and lighting. You really don't. And that's why I'm making this video. As I go down these specs, ask yourself, are you really going to use it? If you're not going to use the vast majority of the specs that I talk about, you may not want to spend $7 grand on a camera. Are you going to shoot 8K video? For someone like me, 8K video is awesome. I can crop in and post. I have several cameras set up for my YouTube videos. 8K video, incredible. 4K video at 120 frames per second for slow motion, again, incredible. For somebody like me making documentaries, slow motion is beautiful. It's wonderful. Are you gonna use that? 50 megapixel files. Again, it's beautiful. It's such a it's such a latitude to be able to work with as a creative. And it's almost like flexing in front of your friends, and you look cool and you're showing off your muscles, but later on your back is sore. Your arms are sore because you flexed a little too hard. The reason I say that is because shooting 50 megapixels, especially at 30 frames a second, seems like this incredible explosion of creation. Well, it's also an incredible explosion of work on the back end. 50 megapixel files take longer to import, longer to cull, longer for the processing on your computer. What about your scratch disks? You know, those things that manage how fast your computer can work with Photoshop? The bigger the files, the longer it takes. How about exporting those JPEGs out? Those things are considerations that you have to make. Do you really need 50 megapixel files? If you do, buy the steak sauce. If you don't, ask yourself, why am I buying a 50 megapixel camera? Real-time autofocus. I think it's awesome. I watched the Sony promo video. One thing I wish they would have done, and if there's another video out there that shows it, I haven't found it. But I watched the Sony promo video, and it's really cool that they talk about how it has bird eye autofocus and that it'll follow them. Unfortunately, all they showed were stills. They didn't show any in-camera autofocus tracking of the birds when they fly around. So I don't know how good that is. If it's great, that's awesome for birders. But again, that's a lot of money to spend on that. And I would imagine that once the birds start flying, it turns into more body following, because it's not going to be able to follow eyes, especially if the bird's not looking at the camera. It's just not going to be able to do it. And let's be real too, if you're shooting birds, and I've shot birds, I've shot wildlife, I've shot South Africa, I've gone on safari, I've shot a lot of that stuff, guys. If you shoot narrowed down enough at f8, f5.6, and you're shooting with a longer lens and there's good available light, which is all of the examples that they showed with the animals and birding shots, all of that sharp focus is attainable, because if you're shooting narrowed down, there's a lot of stuff in focus. So that is attainable. It's not something that you have to spend $7,000 to do. 30 frames per second. Wow, that's insane. It's insane. It's amazing. I've shot NFL games, and when I've done that, I've even rolled off 20 frames a second. It's awesome. The only thing that you have to think about when you're doing 20 frames, 30 frames per second is 20 or 30 frames per second is an insane amount of images. Now, if you are a high-end sports photographer, you're gonna love the 30 frames per second, and you're gonna buy this camera, and you have every reason to do so. File transferring, again, that's awesome. Again, if you're a high-end news photographer, high-end sports photographer, you're going to love that. The vast majority of other folks won't really use that. Electronic shutter with flash. I'm a huge cheerleader of both mirrorless and LED lighting. You guys know that. So this is something that did excite me. The fact that they figured out how to do an electronic shutter and to strobe, I think is fantastic. I'm only hoping, and I think that they will, I'm only hoping that this will trickle down into more cost effective cameras. Again, for somebody like me, I'm the spokesperson for Rotolite. For somebody like me, it's gonna be incredible. It's gonna be incredible to shoot electronic shutter with flash with a lighting system that has no recycle time. So if you are a Rotolite user, somebody like that, this could be worth it for you. If you're not, it may not be. The flicker-free shooting, again, this goes back to the LED lighting. I think this is fantastic. If you're a high-end sports photographer and you're shooting inside stadiums, you're definitely gonna benefit from this. But I also can tell you guys, I use LED lighting more than anyone out there. Personally, unless I'm shooting inside of a stadium or something like that, I've never had problems with my Rotolights using them with Sony. I think it's really amazing for the high-end sports photographers. I don't think it's really gonna apply to portraiture or weddings or stuff of that nature, but just something to think about. But I am really happy that they did it. The anti-distortion that they've improved with their processor over the A9 II, I think is fantastic. It sucks if you bought the A9 II, and that really sucks, because the A9 II came out like less than a year ago, and now they're coming out with the A1, which pretty much just wipes out the A9 II. And that's something that Sony does, and they do it conscientiously. It's like when they came out with the A7 III, they knew it was going to cannibalize the A9. I think the only thing that may exist in the market space there would be For sports photographers who don't want to spend the money on the steak sauce, they're gonna get the ketchup and they're gonna get the A9. If I'm a sports photographer and I don't want to drop $7,000 on the A1, I would hope that it would mean some sort of a price reduction in the A9 lineup. All of this boils down to the money of it. I mean, I think that for what the A1 offers, it's an incredible camera. To full-time pros who need a lot of the functionality that the A1 provides, hell yeah, $7,000 is worth it because you can go do a job, 2, 3, 4 jobs, and you can pay off that camera. But this video isn't related to the pros out there. I've never made my videos for the pros. It's one of the main reasons the pros have never liked my videos. My videos aren't made for them. They're not made for you pros. They're made for the 80% of people who made Sony who they are today. Pros didn't make Sony. The normal people out there, like me, who shoot weddings, who do portraits, who do those types of things, you made Sony who they are today. And you don't need this camera. You, instead of buying this camera, and this isn't hating on Sony because I'm still saying, hey, spend the money you would on an A1 and still go buy more Sony stuff, but just make sure you use your money in a way that takes you further. So as an example of that, I mean, instead of buying an A1, you could go buy an A7 III and 2 G Master lenses. You could buy an A7R III and buy 1 or 2 G Master lenses, or go buy lighting that you really need. I'm telling you, a lot of folks aren't going to notice an enormous difference. I don't even notice that much of a difference between the A7 III and the A9. I just don't. And I shoot as much as anyone in the world. I shoot 3-4 times a week. Even during COVID I have. So I'm just trying to help you understand that if you're watching this and you've built into the hype, I'm not saying the camera's overhyped. I'm saying you just need to understand who it really applies to. It can appeal to all of us, but does it apply to all of us? And I'm going to offer up the argument that it doesn't. I just don't think it does. The truth is, in the photography world, nothing gets outdated more quickly than a camera body. So before you go and spend $7,000 on just the body, ask yourself if there's something else that you could do with that money to really fill the holes of what you need to create the work that you want to create. By the way, I have a lot of great friends at Sony. I love the people at Sony, and I think you guys made a kick-ass camera, and I'm very proud of you. You guys know this was meant for the pros, and you made it for the pros, and you flexed, and you're shaking some people in their boots, and I think that that's awesome. So congrats, my friends. You did a great job with this camera. Until next time, keep shooting, never give up on your dreams. Find a gear that works for you, and remember, you only have one chance to get it right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.